Hello, hello. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. And I'm just going to dive right into the content for tonight. So, thank you, everyone. Well, sorry, I'm going to say hi to everyone in the chat and everything. So, yeah, thank you, everybody, for joining me live. Richard, as always, you are awesome. And yes, I do appreciate it was a dark and stormy night intro. That is, well, that was one of the best opening sentences. However, it has since become quite dated. And I would question anybody who starts a story similar to that because it has been done to death. Anyways, that being said, happy Monday. Hope you're all having a good start to your week. And let's get right into it. When I write a novel, the single most troublesome sentence, the one I go back and rewrite time and time again for hundreds or even thousands of times, is the first. There are other sentences that I go back and I'll change and tweak up and make better, improve, whatever. But they pale in comparison to the amount of time that I read and reread and agonize over that first sentence. There are plenty of sentences that I, read once for each time I go through with a specific editing round. So if I do say 10 edits, then I'll read that sentence once, assuming that it hasn't been changed or introduced in any of the more recent edits, any of those iterations. But that first sentence gets raised up in importance. It sets the mood for the story and to some extent needs to enrapture readers, at least in theory. In actuality, we have a paragraph or even a page to get people hooked. But still, that first sentence is the one that so many writers, myself included, struggle with. Tonight, I am sharing my 5 tips to writing the best possible first sentence, at least in my opinion. Fun note, these strategies can also be applied to each of the chapter's openings. So this is a multi-use topic. Go me. First thing I'll say, first tip, is to avoid purple prose. There's plenty of time to be flexing our writing muscles, and there's a lot of room throughout the length of the story to drag those scenes out and to really show what we're capable of as writers, to paint the perfect scene. For the first greeting to the reader within our story, simple and fast is best. For example, Dresden did it wonderfully with the evocative, the building was on fire and it wasn't my fault. That is a perfect description of the Dresden series in a nutshell and a perfect opening for plenty of books. Honestly, the summarization of the entire Dresden series is something went wrong and I didn't do it, even though he is still kind of tangentially related. Now, I don't need to know what the colors of the fire within the building were, or I keep starting the podcast off with this when I do an audio check. Anyways, now that I can hear without any, anything going on in the way, let's get back to this. So like I said, I didn't need purple prose about how vibrant the color of the fire was, or if it were shades of orange or yellow or green or anything like that. All I need to know is buildings on fire. I can just mentally picture a building on fire. And that is a great way to put me into the story because it allows me to do some of the lifting myself, where I don't need to be force fed exactly what I'm looking at. I can sort of start by coming up with my own imagination to think about what the saying and the characters are. And then it can sort of, the book can sort of spoon feed me details along the way. When I read verbose language in the first sentence, I brace myself for the thesaurus of reading that I know will ensue, and the vomit of words to raise the total word count without truly saying anything. I know, there's a time and place for purple prose, and I do enjoy it when it is craftfully used, but there are so many stories that go overboard with the purple in there, and it just by the end of the book, you're like, yeah, just I don't need to read this page. I don't need to read this page. I don't need to read this page. Let's just get to something that's actually happening instead of somebody, describing something. Or even if it is fantastic action that's happening, if it's described in such a slow way that it drags out the story, I mean, yeah, sure, that gets you to 100,000 word count, but it does so in, I would say, the wrong way. Oh yeah, see, perfect. First line of Killing Floor is I was arrested in Eno's diner. And yeah, I haven't read any of Reacher. I know very little about it, but what I do know that fits in with the mental images that are already ensuing. And I kind of know that he's might be kind of like a Batman character without the money or the miraculous ability to heal. Oh, Richard, that's just mean. I don't need to read this page. Most of Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. Richard, no. Although, to be fair, your comment for Dune does kind of work. But yeah, Lord of the Rings is fantastic. I will eventually go back and reread it, but for now, it's just high pedestal of fantasy storytelling right there. Now, as with all guiding rules, there are always exceptions. That being said, I can't think of an enjoyable book which started with purple prose in the first sentence that didn't bore me throughout the duration of the story. There were excessive words, and like I keep saying, they were stuffed into each subsequent sentence to bloat out that word count without actually really saying anything. Kind of like the last sentence where I used far too many words. Even the greats feel like their wordiness was abused to their detriment. Yeah, I'm actually reading a Stephen King novel now, and it's incredibly vivid. I already used vivid, but it's incredibly detail oriented, and I enjoy the story itself, but it is definitely a long one. So if you're following me in other channels, this month on Scripting the Book, I'll be talking with Nia and Natalie, well, Nia the Vixen of Fiction and Natalie Locke, about Pet Cemetery. So that's the Stephen King book I'm reading, and it's really, really fantastic, but it is also, it's a thick book. Anyways, since this whole point is about being brief, let's move on. Number 2, show, don't tell. Show us who the character is. What are their skills and background? Sherlock Holmes is inquisitive and highly perceptive. Will our character stop mid-pursuit to feed a stray cat? That's hitting the save the cat method directly on the head, but the point still stands. Or is, say, feeding of stray cats strategic to help with a getaway? Here's an example. With my pursuers on my heels, I empty my pockets of the borrowed, crusty bread, calling the wayward cats to aid my escape. My throat clenches at the thought of my starving companions in the dank alleyway who will likely be crushed under thick imperial boots. And I offer a quick prayer to the goddess in their names. In that example, I showed the heroes morally gray as they're feeding stray cats. And it seems like there's kind of a habit and a history of feeding stray cats. But they also know that some of them might get trampled over as obstacles for somebody who is pursuing them. Now, I did cheat a little bit with that example in that there are 2 sentences there, and they are quite lengthy. So that's, ignoring the first rule I just said. But at the same time, I still like where that potential story is going, and the morally gray character being evoked. Along the lines of show, don't tell, give us the tone and attitude of the story. Dresden is quite sarcastic, and that fits in with that single line of the building was on fire and it wasn't my fault. You know that he has a lot of snark in him, and honestly, Dresden's greatest skill for all the magic and knowledge that he has, his greatest skill is his mouth and quick wit. This is also a great chance to show our author a voice. So not only, well, with Dresden, it's kind of, you blur those lines because Dresden's told in first person, but with, say, a third person instance, you can sort of focus on different aspects and convey a lot in how we string our sentences together. Is this opening sentence short? Is it verbose? Is it descriptive? Does it paint a clear image in readers' heads, or does it leave gaps to fill in? The building was on fire, and it wasn't my fault. Building, fire, not my fault. There is a lot of room to work with, and a lot of it isn't really fully developed until later on in the chapter. So we kind of get this writing style of very, very quick action beats, a lot of snark from Dresden, and we have to have a little bit of faith that the details will follow. Number 3, saying a scene is helpful, but boring. I always care about which factions are at war. This can be built in later when I, as a reader, am given a reason to care. Case in point, if the red team is warring against the blue team for 1,000 years, well, that's just a fact. At this point, I don't know which side I should be rooting for, or who we might be following, or more importantly, why I should care about fictional history. I do care about how the character feels about some far-off concept. So immerse us in who the narrator is, and then develop the world. My point is to make any details in those first few paragraphs be immediately essential. Don't include something that's important in 100 pages or a clever moment of foreshadowing. Since, well, yeah, we can invoke some Harry Potter stuff here, where it's in the very first opening we learn who Sirius Black is, and well, sorry, that's more opening chapter, and I've already gone off on a tangent, but within the first chapter, we learn a whole bunch of different characters, but Sirius Black doesn't come back in until the 3rd book. So you kind of get what I'm saying. I don't honestly remember the first sentence of Harry Potter. I do remember it being very catchy, but I don't want to piss off too many people who are now frowning upon the Harry Potter series. So I'm going to slowly shift away from that, just to remind you that what I just said, where it's every single word that's on the page is something that we have to remember. Every single character name is something that we need to store in our heads for possibly later on within the book. So to include somebody who isn't even going to be present for another few books, I mean, yes, it's great to foreshadow a larger world, and to have people come and go, perfectly fine. And yes, when I reread the series, I was fascinated with how well that was planted in, but at the same time, it did kind of detract from my initial reading of the first book. So be careful in building up too much in the future. So one person's name, not that big of a deal. If it's, the world history, that may not come into play until, 100 pages later when there's this diplomatic meeting, maybe postpone it until later on. And to give another reference, though it's a movie, look at Saw 1. The beginning shows a key fall down the drain of a tub, and we know it's important. The scene was set, but not really the who of the characters. It did work here because it's only a 90-minute long movie. I think it might be even shorter than that. And saying the scene is important for the direness of the protagonist's situation. So we didn't really care about who they were so much as, oh no, there's a lot of bad things going on. They're in a dank, enclosed place. They're chained up to a tub. There's a lot of things that are bad with the situation. So that whole saying the scene thing really works because, one, it's a movie, and two, honestly, anybody could have been in that situation and it wouldn't have really changed much. It's more of a survival horror story. And again, this is for a movie, not for a 100,000 word novel. If the first line of the Saw book started with a key falling down the drain, I wouldn't care or feel like it was a good story when that later leads to the hero's downfall at the end. And yes, this entire point is kind of not really valid because there's a little prologue scene before that. So I'm giving kind of a biased view here and sort of picking and choosing how I'm telling certain stories. But hey, I'm an author and that's what I do. And you're on my podcast, which is all about, I guess my view and my opinion. So suffer through it. I don't know. Anyways, in terms of that whole example, I can add in a little saying detail, which I can elaborate in over time. So by my example, I'm talking about the red team versus the blue team. So, we could say the foul-mouthed blue team pursuers Sorry, let me set the scene a little bit more. So I'm going to rework what my previous example with the cats and being pursued, and so now you'll have a little bit more context for what's going on. So this is that example. The foul-mouthed blue team pursuers were on my heels, so I risked tossing out the borrowed crusty bread from my tattered pockets and summoned the wayward cats to aid my escape. Now that is all one sentence, is a bit long, but it does both set the scene, show a little bit about the main character in that they are doing a gamble with the word risk. Tattered pockets implies, maybe not well to do, and aiding escapes. So they are running from the blue team. So whoever this character is, the blue team is probably their enemy. So we get a lot conveyed within that one single sentence. And before I move on to number 4, I'm going to check out the chat. Oh, thank you. I am, in fact, an author. There we go. Yes, this is the first sentence of Harry Potter. Although, no, because I'm sorry, I'm confusing the prologue with the first sentence. So technically, yes. If you have a prologue, then, I mean, the first sentence would still apply to the prologue. Whatever, for at least the purposes of this conversation, this topic, whatever the first sentence that the audience will read, that's the one that really sticks. So would the first Harry Potter book have been better without a prologue? I don't know. But that right there is a fantastic opening sentence. For all the, less than ideal scenarios associated with the Harry Potter series, I would be hard pressed to come up with a better opening sentence than that. It's got characters, location, some attitude, really ideal there. And hey, Felicia, thank you for joining. And Adrian, awesome. I haven't seen you in a while. And yeah, I just got your newsletter this week. So cool. Thank you for joining in here. Oh boy, we got a whole bunch of opening sentences. So we got Anna Karina. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Fair enough. Perfect. So yeah, the for the prologue, then it's the two men appeared out of nowhere a few yards apart in the narrow moonlit lane. So that's kind of an air of mystery to go along with it. Again, really good ways to draw us in for all the faults of the series, for all the faults outside of the series, outside the books themselves, the content in there. I mean, it is well written. It's a bit childlike and it is more basic than some other stories, but teach their own. If you can look past a few, not few, but if you can look past an author who has quite a few issues, but she's a multimillionaire, so she doesn't really have any worries for the rest of her life. So take that for what it is. I will never have millions of dollars to my name, so I can only comment from the outside. Ooh, and yes, also, this is great to share here. Be sure to sign up for my newsletter because coming out in 3 days, I will have an update for the latest edition. And after that, spoiler alert for September, September 3rd, I'm going to have a lot of fun announcements that will be happening over the next month. And so, yeah, definitely sign up for my newsletter so that way you can get this one. And the following one might have some pictures with me with some other author tubers in real life. Who can say? And yes, obviously she's not the first author to be a horrible person, but she is definitely the most prolific in the modern era. I can't think of anybody else who is, first of all, fallen from grace so far. And second of all, I can't think of another modern author who is as reviled by so many people as she currently is. Yeah. Although on the good news, I think that churches have said that Harry Potter is fine by now. So, you get some fans, you lose some fans. I don't know I don't know what the moral that moral lesson that we can take from her experiences is, aside from, don't be a terrible person. Sure, there we go. That's perfectly summed up. Thank you, Richard. So she's still a literary genius regardless of your thoughts on her social commentary. Okay. Yes, that is true, but my understanding was that there was a huge asterisk in there, and that a lot of them were purchased by, hypothetically, a turtle shell company, and that was basically him just, sniffing his own farts and buying his own books. And yes, I understand that authors do sometimes buy our own books because that way we have, stockpiled in, say, my upstairs room, but those are author copies that I will also be selling in real life. And those normally count for my sales within Amazon anyways. So, whatever. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Talk about the art of the deal. Well, yeah. There's a lot of bestsellers that are quite questionable. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Tip number 4, ask a question. Mysteries are the greatest hooks for readers. In that last example that I gave about the foul-mouthed blue team pursuers on my heels and risking, throwing out the crusty bread to bring stray cats in to help with the escape, that raised several questions. First of all, why is the protagonist running? Obviously, they're being chased, but why are they being chased? Will they escape, and will they face retribution for stealing food? Because again, that whole borrowed crusty bread implies, less than legal means, even if the bread is crusty. Now, all that builds to getting the reader to keep reading. Or if they're in the bookstore and perusing the sample at the start. So if they're, online bookstore and they're perusing the sample at the start, do the questions asked garner interest enough to get them to read the next paragraph, and then page, and then chapter? Asking intriguing questions and paying some of them off quickly is a rewarding loop for readers. So open and close mystery boxes to earn the reader's trust so that they want to keep reading to discover the larger mysteries. So in that example of the person narrator running away, I might want to answer at least one of those within the first paragraph. That's where I'm trying to go with that. And then have a couple more breadcrumbs to keep the reader chasing after it for answers. Lastly, number 5, don't start at the start. In that basic example that I keep going on and on about, there's a chase that's already underway. Ignoring the fact that a chase scene, especially those over stolen goods or food, is a terrible trope and overdone, that example is starting well beyond the start. The character didn't wake up and brush their teeth, meander to the market, steal something, and then run. Depending on the type of story I want to tell, I could have started with a sentence about how hungry the character is, that they're looking longingly at their hated rivals, stuffing their faces with freshly baked food, the likes of which the hero can barely dream of as their mouth is watering. Or I could have shown the hero's craftiness by starting with the character swiping a cooked steak and replacing with an IOU note or something along those lines. The choice in where to start is almost as important to consider as what we're writing. My advice here is to start by saying something. Show us who we're following. Show us why we should be interested in them. Bake in some snark and attitude to make the narrator more relatable, or ask a question to make us turn the page. That's a lot to accomplish with just one sentence, so being brief may not be possible. My example earlier was a pretty long sentence. Then again, the Dresden example is 10 words maybe? And that is regarded as a fantastic opening. So use what works, adapt as much as you can. And, like I said, some of these might apply to opening sentences, but they can also apply to the first sentence in a new chapter to try and keep that reader going and going and going. Those are my 5 tips to starting off our stories. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. How do you prefer to begin your writing with your stories? What are some of your favorite openings to read? Let me know in those comments. We've already gotten a few in here, ranging from classic literature to modern day storytelling and Richard's distaste of Lord of the Rings. Be sure to help this channel start as we are approaching a new season by running to that like button. This is episode 21, so I got 5 more episodes, and then it will be on to season 8. Again, seasons are very arbitrary. They're just a way of me tracking my channel's progress in iterations of 26. So every marathon I go, in terms of episodes, not actual running a marathon, so every 26 episodes is a new season or so. There's some variance there because it's 26.2 miles, so sometimes I might throw in a bonus episode. Anyways, you can certainly help me start off season 8 as best as possible by hitting that like and subscribe button. As I already mentioned with my monthly newsletter, don't forget to sign up. Coming soon, I'll be attending, like I said and hinted at, an impromptu international AuthorTube meeting. That's right, I'm going to UK, and I'm going to be hanging out with a bunch of you on the other side of this screen. By the time my newsletter comes out, there will be, well, not this newsletter because it's October 3rd, but the following newsletter will be showing a lot more details and possibly images if people are okay with having their pictures taken. And it will be proof that I can actually come out from behind this computer screen. And I can't wait for some European mischief. See you next time. Until then, let's write stunning open sentences that pull readers in and don't let us go until the final page. But with that in mind, let's see how Chad is doing. And when do we actually start the podcast? That is a good question. I can do mental math. We are, I can't do mental math. Who am I kidding? We're 181 episodes in, roughly 52 episodes. Well, this is main episodes, so 52 episodes per year, give or take. We are almost 3 years in. So yeah, I think it's April. This coming April will be my 4-year anniversary with this channel of Writing to Write. Assuming my math is decent there. Apparently October 3rd is Mean Girls Day. So, ooh, there's a lot of, yeah, perfect. Thank you, Richard, for doing the research. That is the opening of my first book. So Derek Fenn struggled to keep up with Tracy Wayfield. It's a bit short. There's a lot more to it than that. That wasn't the original start of my, that wasn't the original planned start. There was a lot more scenes that I cut from that first chapter. But yeah, I'm happy with the way that my Into the Void series started. You know, Derek struggling to keep up with Tracy Wayfield is a pretty good metaphor for the entire series. Sorry, yeah. A lot of people don't like 50 Shades and Twilight because of holy cow moments. Yeah, I said it's almost, oh, sorry. No, because it would be my 4-year, it would be my 3rd anniversary, 4th year doing the podcast. Is that how math works? Because you don't start on 0 with the anniversaries, you start on 1. Or sorry, the first anniversary is year 1, so yeah. I don't know. Math is hard. Either way, I'll have been doing this for 4 years, so sure. 4-year, 4th anniversary, maybe. I don't know. With that, I'm going to see you all next week and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care.